Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 6 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home, and that includes the Laboratory Book 3 called The District. After that I'll be reviewing The Reaper's Neuro Book 3. After that it'll be The Slime, A Call of Tuatha. I think that's how it's pronounced. After that, it'll be Bitter Book number 2, and immediately followed by Bitter Book 3. And then the last thing I'm reviewing this week is going to be Devils, Demons, and Dead Man's the LitRPG Thriller, Kings and Conquest, Book 1. I have a few things to say about that one in particular. Okay, but of course, to begin with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we actually don't have a lot of LitRPG news this week. It's been a slow news week, I guess. But Daniel Schienehofen was very nice enough to release the cover art for the 4th book in the Afterworld series called Playing for Keeps. And if you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can see that it's a nice village camp in a canyon, and they're going to be raided very soon. So it's a very action-oriented, but also city-building-oriented kind of cover. Very nice, actually. Very, very pretty, I have to say. But he just revealed it, and here it is. So that's kind of it for LitRPG news, though. Out now, though. These are a couple stories that just came out. Haven't reviewed them. And here they are. The Builder's Throne, Legendary Builder, Book 5, written by J. Cipriano, is out now. If you're into that series, I'm not going to be reviewing this story because it's the series on a whole has become less and less RPG oriented and more just like harem action stuff, and that's fine. But it's genuinely kind of lost my interest at this point. So I'll still be letting you guys know when new books in the series come out. But it's just kind of lost me, unfortunately. But there you go. Also out now is Fayroll Book 7, Different Sides by A. Vasiliev. Again, this is the 7th book in this particular series, and I'm kind of feeling very similar about this one as well. It's one of those things that as the series goes on, 7, 8, 9, 10 books, it's harder to keep interest in it because sometimes you feel like the plot's not going anywhere. And that's kind of the case with the Fayroll Book 7 series. For the last couple of books, I'm like, okay, this is not bad. This is still entertaining, but it's still very much, if you're a fan, like a hardcore fan of the series, you're going to buy each book. And that's kind of the way it goes. But very much like sometimes the plots feel like they're just repeating or spinning in place. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I'm probably going to read this next week. I just couldn't find the energy to read it this week, unfortunately. Okay, some new stuff that came out as audiobooks for LitRPG, quite a few actually, including You're Not Allowed to Die, 20-Sided Eye, book number 1 by Kip Tarrington. That's out currently. Dungeon Lord, The Rat's Haunt, by Hugo Huesca. Very nice story, narrated by Jeff Hayes. Also out as an audiobook, Accidental Thief, a LitRPG Accidental Traveler, book 1 in that particular series, written by C.D. Davis and Jamie Davis. Also out as an audiobook is The Crystal Flower Keep, Elements of Wrath Online, Book 3, written by J. Cipriano and J.B. Gardner. That's the 3rd book in that series. Also out as an audiobook is Infinite Assassins Daggerland Online, Novel 2, written by Peter Meredith. And this one was actually just a surprise that dropped today. Very happy to see that it's here, actually. Dungeon Calamity, Divine Dungeon, Book 3 is out as an audiobook, written by, of course, Dakota Crowd, friend of the podcast. I've talked to him many times on the show, even some author interviews. Fun guy. So go check that one out. It's a really good story. Okay, next up, upcoming LitRPG. This is just a list of LitRPG stories that I know that's going to be coming out, either from the authors or from Amazon's pre-order list. Here we go. Feel free to skip ahead if you don't. Not an issue, but there are a few new additions to the list. On January the 26th, that's this upcoming day, Friday. Permadeath Online, a LitRPG Adventure Book 1 should be out. Also on the 26th, it will be Return to a Dungeon, a Monster MC LitRPG Cobalt Quest Book number 1. On the 31st of January, finally got some cover art from the author, Dave Wilmarth. This is the third book in his series, Greystone Chronicles, called Darkness Fallen. It's a very different type of cover art. If you've seen the first two, they are very different, and this one is almost painted very fantasy oriented, so I actually like this one better. But that'll be out again on January the 31st. On February the 1st, it'll be Bushido Online, Friends and Foes, which is the second book in that series. On February the 7th, this one is actually a new addition to the list. Respawn, Lives 1 through 5, written by Arthur Stone. If you recognize that name, that's the same author who wrote the Weirdest Noob series. So he's a Russian author who's been translated into English, and this is another LitRPG series of his. On the 28th of February, it'll be Kingdom Level 4. This one's also new to the list. February 28th, Dragon Seed, a Liberty Dragon Rider adventure. We'll see how that goes. Sometime in February, it's still going to be The Clan Wars, the last book of the Way the Shaman series. On March the 6th, it'll be The Dark Paladin book number 3 called Restart. Also written by Vasily Mihenko. On March 12th, Avatar's Rising. On March 15th, the second book in the Permadeath Online series is going to be called just Permadeath Online Book 2. Same cover art, just has Book 2 there. On March 16th, it'll be Achilles' Reign, Patera Online Book 4. So there you go, folks. All of the stuff I know that's coming out in the near future months. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, folks, this is the meat of the show, the reviews of the actual stuff that's come out recently. Going to begin with Skylar Grant's The Laboratory Book 3, a futuristic dungeon core titled The District. Okay, this is 206 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and surprisingly, a lot of the ones on this particular show, not on Kindle Unlimited. That's a very big twist, but this one is, so appreciate it while you can. This is the author's description of the story. Emma has gained control of one of the districts of a city run by a woman that she tried to kill. While her new position has improved her upgrade abilities, the other district heads have had theirs enhanced as well. More of what the series is known for, more superpowered action, more insults and more upgrades, and a struggle to survive. And that description is completely accurate. There are, just as a side note, this particular book in the series seems to have more grammar and spelling errors. It's been noted in several reviews on Amazon that this one felt a little rushed, just like maybe could have used another editing pass. But even I noticed it, and that's striking, which is unusual, I guess. But I'm just letting you know, because some people get bugged by that kind of stuff. But overall, it didn't really bother me in particular. What did bother me is the fact that the story felt a little meh for me. There's nothing wrong with the story in any way, shape, or form. It's just nothing new is brought to the table. It's a lot of the same stuff from books 1 and 2, as far as like what Emma is capable of. There's no dungeon building in this particular story, which is, what book 1 and 2 did that felt interesting. In particular, it's a dungeon master story. And in this one, there's no dungeon at all. There's a lot of upgrade stuff for Emma and some of her minions, and there's a lot of great fights and battle scenes for control of this special area that they're in. That's almost like a city. But one of the things I kind of noted in this particular book in the series is that Emma seems extra overpowered. Like in books 1 and 2, there was some resource management in that she had to gather resources for scientific research, for upgrades for the characters, for herself. And so there's a little bit of resource management stuff. In this particular book, though, in book 3, that kind of disappeared, or is like kind of waved away by upgraded abilities. And so anytime Emma upgrades or has to do something or build whatever, it almost feels like she's pulling for an unlimited resource pool. So that kind of takes away some of the tension and stakes in the story, and that there are decisions that have to be made. In this one, there's like Emma, the main character, just has to decide, what do I feel like doing today, or what needs to be done to solve this particular problem, and throw resource points at it. You know what I mean? So that was kind of a drawback for me. And again, like just lots of action. There's really good action in this novel. It's Emma versus a bunch of other characters with powers. And like I said, it's very action-oriented story. It's just that I'm missing a lot of things I really like from books 1 and 2. And nothing really is new here. It really did feel kind of just like, oh, it was the action kind of picked up from just being 5 out of 10, being meh, but just kind of barely, at least for me. So it gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. That's The District, a futuristic dungeon core, the laboratory book number 3, with a score of 6 out of 10. So there we go. Not my favorite in the series. Okay, on to our next book, The Neuro by A. Levandi. This is the Reapers book number 3. So there we go. This is 461 pages, $5.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. So this is one of many that is not going to be available on Kindle Unlimited in this particular episode. Again, this is Russian, translated into English. This is also the same author from another series, which escapes my brain for a moment. I'll get to it in a minute. The author's description, though. Alex and Inya are back in the crystal sphere where in their absence, a catastrophe has struck. Virtuality is now controlled by the Reapers, hybrid entities involved from high-level NPCs who kill human players to harvest the neurograms. Reapers are constantly on the prowl for more neurograms. No one is safe from their cannibalistic greed. Survival in this new world becomes an ever-increasing challenge. A Reaper army is about to invade the Argon cluster. Rion Castle has become the player's last outpost, but the struggle is too unequal. And again, that's true. It doesn't really encapsulate a lot of the big points in the story, but it gives you a pretty good gist. If you've been following the series, this one might kind of throw you for a little bit of a loop, because at the end of book 2, there's kind of a cliffhanger, and book 3 starts 3 years later. Literally, it's a 3-year time jump into the future from book 2. And for the main character, Alex, and his I don't want to say girlfriend, but, female companion, who's also a player, Enya, it only feels like moments to them, because from their point of view, they were essentially just kind of stuck in a little time blip. And again, the time jump is fully explained multiple times, and it's just kind of something you're going to have to accept. Otherwise, this entire story is really just going to bug the heck out of you. So just one of those things. Another big shift in the story is that it gets more sci-fi-ish. So it kind of there's a really big shift from just straight fantasy to incorporating more sci-fi aspects. And there's this one kind of definitely establishes like the big connection to the author's other LitRPG sci-fi series called The Phantom Server, which I forgot the name of earlier. And that connection becomes much bigger, much more apparent, and whether you kind of like it or not, some people don't like the connection, it's there. And so those two stories are really intermingling in this particular, this potentially last book in this particular series. Okay, so the story is entertaining. Like I basically had a good time reading it. I did. It resolves just about every story thread I can think of in the novel. Other reviews say that there were a few things that are missing, but for the most part, it's a really decent kind of end cap for the story, if that's what the author's going to do, and it kind of feels like it is. All the questions you may have had about the story previously, like who are the Reapers, where do they come from, what's happening in the real world, the connection to the other story, the Phantom series, what are these neuro-enhancing devices really, you get all those explanations. So you don't have to have read the Phantom Server series rather, to get all the information. The author explains it all in this particular book. And explains the connection to that world. And it's just, if you've read that other series, you're like, oh, so that's where that, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense now. That kind of thing will happen as you're reading this. As usual, there's lots of action and adventure in the story as the guild and the remnants of the human players try to defend themselves from the Reapers that can kill them in-game and in real life permanently. The ending really does wrap things up well. It does feel a little rushed in a few places. And a little kind of like info dumpy, but that's just because, like this seems like it's the end of the series. I don't know for sure that it is. The author has left like a little bit of like room at the end of the novel to continue writing in this world if he so chooses, but it feels like it's kind of the end of this particular trilogy. So as it is, I had a good time reading it. I give it a score of 7 out of 10. There we go. That's The Reapers, the Neuro book number 3, with a score of 7 out of 10. There we go. Okay, on to our third review, Slime, Call of Tuatha, Book 1, written by Outspan Foster. So that's also the name that author uses on the Royal Road, if you're familiar with that particular author in his series. It is 268 pages, $3.99. It is also not available on Kindle Unlimited. You can also read this on the Railroad. That's why the author isn't using Kindle Unlimited, because that requires a bit of exclusivity to Amazon. And here is the author's description. Lysander Blacknail invested 40 hard years of his life in service to the war god Tuatha. But in Lysander's greatest act of service to his god, he is betrayed. He finds himself in the body of a slime, inheriting odd abilities and an overwhelming circumstance. His only drive for survival is revenge. As a slime, the weakest monster in the world, he must discover a way to gain enough power and get his humanity back. So there you go. That's the author's description. Again, originally this is Surrender Road. These are the first 2 arcs of that series in an edited novelized form. This is basically a slice of life story where the main character is a slime. If you know what a slice of life story is, it basically means that there may not be a real plot here. In a lot of slice of life stories, it's just you following the main character as they do their daily thing, whether it's going to be killing monsters, crafting, adventure stuff, or going to school, or whatever the case is. It's just you following on their journey, almost in a diary-ish format, where it's like almost a daily or weekly adventure. And sometimes those adventures are connected, but it's just you following that character in general. And that's what this is for the most part. The first arc, which is about 50% of the story, is all about the main character, Lysander, being betrayed by his god in this RPG fantasy world and finding himself in the body of a slime. He has, again, all the RPG potential needed as a human, notifications that describe powers, health, skills that can be learned and improved, all the RPG stuff. This is totally LitRPG. And part of that first arc is him discovering how those mechanics work for him as a slime, as opposed to him being a human, and figuring out how he can become more powerful. Because again, his ultimate goal is to kill the god who betrayed him, and that's not an easy thing for a slime. And so he kills a bunch of slimes in the story and figures out how things work. And about 20% of the story, I honestly got a little bored. And it's not that the story is badly written. It's just that there's a lot of repetition of like, kill a slime, become more powerful. Can I do this thing? Can I not? Figure it out. Haha. And I would suggest if you were feeling the same way I did about that point, don't drop the story. Kind of push through it. It gets better. It gets the creatures that the slime character kills becomes a little more varied, and then it shifts into a different arc entirely. So it works out, at least for me. I'm glad that I just didn't drop the story, because again, at about the 20% mark, I was just feeling got a little repetitive, but as I pushed through it. The second arc is more of a traditional fantasy story. The main character leaves the area he was in and he started out in to help his cat friend. And the story gets a little more complicated as the main character starts interacting with humans. And I don't want to spoil the story because it's kind of a shift. Part of the enjoyment of these kind of stories is just kind of discovering where the main character goes along their journey. But there are fewer RPG power-ups, but there's more world building and more character development here. Like, there are definitely points in the second arc of the show where it's just, blah, here's the world backstory, or here's this character's backstory, and that's just how the story goes. So I happen to like that kind of stuff. I love like world building stories and learning about myths and histories of the world. I'm into that kind of stuff. So it worked for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. There's also plenty of good fights in the second arc of the story. And it almost feels like there is an actual designated plot in the second arc a little bit more. And it was a nice change from the more slice of life stuff in the first arc. Overall, entertaining read. I had a good time reading it. There are, again, plenty of small little errors, grammar, spelling, and some plot holes that you can, stick your fist through, but nothing like too major that kind of took away from the story, at least for me. I had a good time reading it. Score of 7 out of 10. Slime, Call of Tuatha, book 1 with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our next story, Bitter, book number 2 by V. Moody. I previously reviewed this book not that long ago, and it was one of those things like, I must have missed this coming out originally, or just like not read the description to see it's like a LitRPG story. And so I've been trying to catch up in this week. I just happened to catch up on the entire series up to whatever's published. Books 2 and 3 I'll be reading back to back, so I might be like referring to them back and forth a little bit. This book 2, however, in the series is 327 pages, $3.99. It is, again, not available on Kindle Unlimited. Neither is book 3, so it is unfortunate. These ones, however, again, per page count, pretty reasonably priced at about 10 cents a page. So the 327 pages here for $3.99. You know, as far as like the story goes, I think it's worth it. I paid it. But again, you guys can decide. I believe there are also like some snippets online if you want to go check this out, just to get like a taste of, like what the story is about. Now the author actually doesn't do a really good job of like describing what the stories are. He copy and paste, or she, I actually don't know if it's a guy or girl. But Moody copies and pastes the exact same novel description for each part. And it's the MMORPG has arrived along with bugs, exploits, OP classes, and top nerf, P2W, ridiculous RNG, lock bosses raging, much of the stuff. And it's the same thing. Bitter is an ongoing slice of life about a girl who finds her life isn't what she wanted, so she gets another one. So there you go. And that's what the author describes it as. I'm going to give you my own description of it just because I think it kind of tells you a little bit better what the story is about. Just as a reminder, in book 1 of the series, Britta is a teenage girl who's curious to understand why her dad is always playing a VR game. Late one night, she decides to use his expensive VR gear to create her own character and see what all the fuss is about. She doesn't care about her character, and she has randomly chosen to be a gnome illusionist. Just random race, random class. Let's get into it. But she quickly finds out it's one of the weakest builds in the entire game. Yet, something goes awry. Instead of the standard MMO experience, the team seems to have some mysterious connection with the AI governing the game, and each NPC interaction is as full and detailed as it would be in real life. Now, that's part of the mystery of the story, and that nobody really knows why that's the case for her. So in book 2, Britta's back, fresh off her deal with the developers that she makes at the end of book 1. She'll be monitored to see how her unique interaction with the game world changes. Britta, however, is only interested in having fun in the game and decides to try her hand at a beginner level dungeon. Only, again, nothing unfolds as it should. Instead, she finds a possessed dwarf chasing her and a backstabbing group through a cobalt-filled mine. Can she defeat the dwarf and free the cobalt from its terrifying presence? So again, that's my description of book 2. And again, this is a slice of life story that was again originally published online as a serial. So of the 3 books that I've read so far, this one's my favorite. And that's mostly because it kind of has the most coherent plot story. Mostly. About 80% of the story in book 2 revolves directly around this beginning dungeon, the Mines of Korla, and Britta's attempt to beat it. Now, this is supposed to be like a very easy beginner dungeon for most players. They go in, it's a maze, they fight a few kobolds, and they get out. That's the standard player experience here. But Britta's experience is, again, very different. Her and another character, Stan, get involved in a very unique storyline involving a possessed dwarf, cobalt miners, a town crime family, and a corrupt mayor. It's really kind of cool. Part of the story is about Stan being a jerk and how he tries to use his influence in the game and with like a large guild, trying to force Britta back into his group because he can't get that unique storyline without her. The other part of the story is just the characters figuring out different tactics to beat this high-level possessed dwarf in an almost like Groundhog Day cycle of death. And it's really entertaining. I really did enjoy it. Up to this point, I was actually considering giving the book like an 8 out of 10 because it was very enjoyable. And it's just one of those things like I couldn't do it because at one point in the story, like the story arc just veers off. And I'm like, and it was like, I felt like it was just about to get a resolution. Like it was just like, this was the end and this was going to resolve this entire dungeon crawl thing. And it was really well done. And then it's just like, it just takes a different story path from the dungeon directly entirely. And instead focuses again on her normal life and this whole murder mystery thing. And I'm like, oh wait, that's disappointing. Because again, it's just like, it was heading towards like a resolution and the author just decided to change direction, and that's cool. I'm not arguing with the author's decision or right to do so, but for me, I was like, oh, I could see the end of the arc, and it just went somewhere else. At some point, I had realized this is what it is. Like the author tells you in advance, this is a serialized story online, and it's a slice of life story, and you have to understand that that's what this is. This is what happens. Like this story just is a weekly or monthly or daily, whatever it is. additions to this serialized story. And so, no, the author can't just like finish it off there. He plans to write more for whatever period of time it is. And so sometimes there aren't just these simple encapsulated resolutions that you get in like traditional novelized stories. And that took away a little bit from me, but it's still a good story. It really is. You just have to understand what kind of story you're reading when you get into this series. And that's going to be something that comes up every single time in this novel. That sometimes that happens. But for me, again, even though I was a little disappointed the arc didn't finish, it is what it is. I like slice of life stories though. So if you like that kind of story, great. If you're one of those people who like soap operas and they're ongoing stories that don't ever really sometimes finish, or like they just shift, directions occasionally, that's kind of what these slice of life stories are. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you'll probably enjoy this. I did, but if you're not into that kind of story, if you need an encapsulated beginning, middle, and end, don't start this. It's going to frustrate you. But for me, I'd enjoyed it. Get the score of 7 out of 10. That's Biter Book 2 with a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, on to number 3. Hey, look, it's just a color shift. Purple and red, or blue and red, depending on what you're seeing. Let's not get into that stuff. Okay. Also by V. Moody. This one is 354 pages, $3.99. I'll read my description since, again, the official description is exactly the same as book 2 with no additions of like what's actually happening in the story. Okay. Book 3. Stan, the backstabbing psycho, and Britta's unexpected ally is trapped in the game. He's been arrested and imprisoned for murdering an NPC. If Britta doesn't figure out what's really happening and prove who really killed the NPC, Stan may just be trapped in the game permanently, or worse. Well, there you go. That's my description of the story. That gives you interest. The review portion is basically this portion of the story really to shift into slice of life again. The in-game story revolves around Britta, the main character, investigating the truth about the corrupt mayor, the dwarves, their connections to the cobalt mine. There's a whole thing there. In addition to that, there are more regular slice of life stories, like the main character exploring crafting, catching up with characters from book 1, doing random quests, and some stuff in real life, like going back to school and those descriptions. The real life storyline also takes a very interesting twist in that the main character actually learns more about the governing AI for the world, and there are some there's a little bit of sci-fi aspect there and some interesting truths there, and it's entertaining. But again, it is different from like the encapsulated story that is almost in book 2. It is very much like, follow her through her adventures and wherever she decides to go. Again, there's some very interesting story threads in book 3. But a lot of the time, they're only followed for a short period of time, and it feels like they're almost abandoned sometimes. And that's just, again, the nature of a serialized story that's been turned into a novel. So you do have to, again, accept that that's the kind of story that this is. There we go. That's kind of it. Again, I had a good time with the book as well. There is a cliffhanger at the end of this one, so just an FYI. Again, that's just the nature of these kind of stories. The author basically is written for whatever, and it's just kind of deciding where to make the cuts. So it is what it is. I had a good time, though. Score 7 out of 10 from this one as well. That's Bitter, book 3, with a score of 7 out of 10. Okay, last one in the review section. This one is Devils, Demons, and Dead Men, a LitRPG thriller written by Shane Locken Black. So there you go. This one is 216 pages, $3.99. This one is available on Kindle Unlimited, so there you go. The author's description. By the time most people have heard of the newest multiplayer fantasy role-playing game, Kings and Conquests, developer Fairly Unusual Games has been overwhelmed by a $200 million crowdfunding haul. Founders' accounts are going to 6-figure contributors. There is a lack of augmentation. There is talk of an augmented reality mobile accessory app. With contributors in the media eagerly anticipating a release date announced, Fairly Unusual stocks said, this is a very long introduction. And it honestly doesn't matter because this novel is a re-release of something that's already been published. In the novel description, the author basically acknowledges that the portions of this novel were previously published under the title Overpowered, a LitRPG thriller by Shane Lockman Black. And that story got a score of 4 out of 10 for not actually being LitRPG. If you're watching the video version of this, I'm actually going to show you the original cover art for it, so if you recognize it at all. But that's what this story originally was published under. And so this is kind of that one was taken down after a lot of negative reviews, and this is the new one that the author decided to put up. Now, after a side-by-side comparison that I did of the original and this version of it, it's actually, it's evident to me at least, that this is the exact same story with some additional content, some additional text. Approximately an additional 13,440 words have been added to that story, and you get this one. So about 5/6 of this novel is the same as Overpowered, a LitRPG thriller, which kind of got a lot of negative reviews. Now, I sent a message off to the Palace in the Sky, the publishers, in regards to this particular novel and what changes were new to the story, and why the author chose to pull the original and replace it with this one, with the new name in particular. Now, the author's response, he was very nice about it. He wrote me back his pretty detailed email. A lot of it was just like, oh, enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for taking the time, etc. But he actually did answer the questions. And I've taken some excerpts to kind of just show what he said about the story. He wrote, "Alas, I wasn't happy with the way the story turned out. The game elements I needed to do my world building weren't at the quality level I wanted. The story's plot didn't have the punch I was working towards when I started." Also, he wrote, "I went back through the first book and mapped out a better plot, drew better personalities and motivations for my main characters, altered a number of scenes, did some better world building with the gracious assistance of my fantasy-minded colleagues and their wonderful ideas, and most importantly, changed the ending so book 1 could serve as a better jumping off point for book 2 and the rest of the series. I think the new book has a much better title and cover." And lastly, the section that kind of answer the question is, "My most important motivation for reworking the novel was the fact that readers didn't seem happy with my first attempts." And this is all true. And so as far as like the author's explanation of why he chose to pull down the original version and put this one up, that's his answer. And again, he answers all the questions I had for him. However, a lot of that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying the author's lying or deceiving anybody intentionally in any way, shape, or form, but having compared the two side by side, literally, that's not the story. There it is. There's really no difference between the two, with the exception of, like, again, there's some added content. The beginning of the novel is probably going to be the most noticeable, and that first 10%. And I don't think that's unintentional. That's the 10% that people would download. And with an Amazon sample. But that beginning portion has a new chapter 0, and it goes into a little more character development for Wyland, who's a big character in the story, kind of shown that he's not just a greedy jerk, but kind of a genius. And so there is more character development there. Now, the random changes of the story are mostly additive connective tissue. And what I mean by that is that there's additional text at the end of some chapters that provide a smoother transition into the next chapter. It's one of those things that kind of bugged me about the original story, is that there would be these scenes about, oh, this is their best game ever, a bunch of hype about it, and then suddenly the main characters in the story are playing it. And there wasn't a transitional scene between that hype and those characters just suddenly have access to it. And it's not necessary for the story, but the author really did go back and add some more connective tissue. So I was like, additional content that kind of transitions into those older parts of the story a little bit better. There's also some more descriptive information about characters, and some more minor character building for, again, the no-name group, the no-name game group, and one of the, I want to say villains, but that guy, Wyland. However, after the 67% mark of the story, with the exception of eliminated curse words, the story changes stop entirely, and the rest of the novel is literally identical to the old version, including the ending, which the author claimed he changed to be a better jumping off point for book 2 and the rest of the series. That statement is completely not true, because the endings for both Devils, Demons, and Deadman and Overpowered are exactly the same word for word. So There we go. Overall, this version of the novel has the same issues I pointed out with the first one, which includes the fact that most of the beginning part of the story is just hype about the game. It's no actual gameplay. Now, in the new version of the story, which is this one here, there is like a little brief demo in the first 25% of the story, but it's literally less than 1% of the novel, where like the characters are watching somebody play a demo. The actual gameplay with the main characters doesn't start till the 41% mark of the story. And so for that entire first like 40%, with the exception like a really tiny scene, it's just hype about the story, that it's going to be the best, or that they're intentionally doing a broken game to get people interested in the story and crowdfunding stuff and whatever. The second point of issue I had with the original story was the fact that most of the story isn't about the game. And most of the story doesn't even take place in the game world. Most takes place outside of the game. In the original story, only 13% of the story was actually in game, and even then, it was told from the perspective of these characters in this game playing guild, the No Name Game Guild, looking at their screens, playing game, clicking on keyboards, moving mouse, and actually detailed in the original review the exact places in the story where they were, like these little scenes. In this particular version of the story, that percentage of in-game story goes all the way up to 16%. Yes, there's slightly more content, but it's like an extra 3%. So the other, 84% of the story is still outside of the game, in the real world, people talking, lawyers, thriller stuff. And like I said, as a thriller, this really is the focus on the story. It's more of a sci-fi thriller. It is definitely not LitRPG. And again, after a certain point in the story, all the game stuff just disappears. And that's still the case here. It just shifts that percentage. In the original story, it was at the 65% mark where like the main characters find out somebody's really hunting them in real life and they have to flee. That just occurs at the 67% mark in the story. So it's exactly the same. After that point, there is no more game stuff. It's just on them on the run. So the story still isn't LitRPG. To me, the author seems to be trying to take another bite at the apple by deleting the original version with all the negative reviews and poor average review scores, and replacing this with a slightly longer one. Again, I'm not saying the author doesn't add content. He adds another 13,440 words, which is relatively significant. But the story's the same. Like there might be some more character descriptions, more connective tissue, but the story is the same. It's not a new story. Personally, I think it's a little disingenuous to present it as a story, but the author does say, again, in the description, portions of this were really says this other thing. So he's at least acknowledging that there is the connection there, but I think it's not portions of it. Was this entire story was originally released as this thing, and now we have additional content. I think that would be a more genuinely true statement. A slightly weirder note for the story. I left this review on Amazon. This is exactly what I'm telling you now. And it was there for like a second, and then it disappeared from the description. I don't know if the author has anything to do with it, or it just could be some weird Amazon quirk. But that's just kind of a weird twist to this particular review story, I guess. For me, though, it gets a score of 4 out of 10. And this is one of those unique cases where I've, in the full description of the review on the podcast show notes, I've actually listed every single change that I noted in this particular story, and where it occurs. So if you happen to be interested in like where the actual changes are, like, point for point, page for page, percent per percent, whatever it is, I have those in the full review show notes for this particular review, so you can kind of see exactly the changes that occur and how they don't actually change the story in any significant way. So if you want to check that out, go look at the full show notes in the particular story at geekbitespodcast.com or LitRPGpodcast.com as well. Same place, full show notes for this particular episode. Okay, and that's it. So for Demons, Devils, Demons, and Nedmen, a LitRPG thriller, Kings and Conquest Book 1, score 4 out of 10 because it's not LitRPG. There you go. Okay, that's it for the show, everybody. Thank you very much for listening and watching. This is probably one of the shorter episodes I've had in a while. But there you go. Great stuff. Had a good time talking to you folks at home. Thanks for hanging out with me. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, all these great places. Go check us out. Go follow us. Really, legitimately, we throw up actual reviews throughout the entire week, as I should say I do, as I finish these books. And if you want to check them out earlier than this particular podcast, the best place to find those is, Twitter and Facebook, because I post them as I generally finish them. And YouTube, of course, it's just you get the video, the notification as soon as this podcast is finished. Thanks again. If you're new to the podcast and want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can find all the ways to do so, including Patreon, which is great, because that actually pays for the podcast. You can find all the ways to support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And again, if you're an author listening to this and you have a LitRPG novel you know you're planning to publish in the near future and you want it to come up on the upcoming podcast list, just feel free to email us at feedback@geekbindspodcast.com, and we'll be sure to add that to the notes of the show. But again, thanks for hanging out with me, and until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.